Hello, my name's Rachel and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I am going to be giving you my Vanguard 3-month investing update. So this is the video where I made some investments that I wanted to make and then made some investments with Vanguard as well, and I'm going to compare how they're doing and how they've done over the last 3 months. And let me tell you that one of these investments is up 16% in just 3 months. So I've got some really interesting results to share with you. I've also added in a little bit more detail and a little bit more data on some of the investments just to give you a nice rounded picture of all the investments on the whole. So I have been investing in funds, trusts, ETFs and individual stocks and shares for a while now. I started with investing in funds around about 3 years ago and then have really enjoyed learning as much as I can and seeing how my investments do. So I've obviously heard a lot of positive things about Vanguard. Everyone absolutely loves their low fees and the fact that they're really trusted in the marketplace as well. So I wanted to invest in some Vanguard investments, but I also had already chosen some investments that I wanted to make for myself that could potentially return higher returns. So I chose to make these investments in my investment ISA. I hold an investment ISA with Barclays Smart Investor and then also one with Fidelity, but on both of those platforms you can actually buy Vanguard funds and ETFs as well. So you don't have to just be investing in Vanguard investments with the Vanguard platform, you can buy them elsewhere. So let me get straight to the results because I know that's probably what you're interested in. So I invested almost £5,000 into 2 investments that I had chosen and selected and researched for myself that I wanted to make. And those 2 investments were the Invesco Markets EQQQ NASDAQ 100 UCITS, and I chose to invest in that because you couldn't get that kind of investment elsewhere. You couldn't get an equivalent with Vanguard, so I invested £2,365.70 into that investment, and that investment is now worth £2,744.30, which is 16% in the last 3 months. So I am really pleased with that investment. It was definitely timed well, which is more luck for me rather than judgment, if I'm completely honest, but I am very pleased with that. And then the other investment that I chose to make was in the Pacific Horizon Investment Trust, which is a trust rather than an ETF. And I invested £2,510.89 in that, and it is now worth £2,555.28, which is an increase of £44.39, or a 1.76% increase in the last 3 months. All the spreadsheets and everything on the screen if you want to see them as well. So the 2 equivalent investments that I decided to make were based on risk level. So I wanted to choose 2 investments that had the same risk level as the investments I was choosing to make with Vanguard. So that is how I chose them. However, I am going to include a couple more Vanguard investments just for comparison that are closer in region for comparison, because I think a lot of people in the comments want to see a more similar comparison in terms of sector and region rather than risk level, so I thought it was important to include that as well. So I'll include those in a minute, but for now, talking about the investments that I made which have the same risk level. So the other 2 investments, as I said, have the same risk level as the investments that I chose to make. I thought that was very important because I often think people will go with Vanguard or a specific investment based on a risk level and the idea that potentially the Vanguard funds might be less risky. I wanted to make sure the risk levels for both the investment that I was going to make and the Vanguard investment matched up, because otherwise I didn't think it would be a fair comparison. So the risk levels for these are both at levels 5 and 6, which are the same for the investments that I made. So the first one that I made was in Vanguard Lifestrategy 100%, and I made a £250 investment in that. It's now worth £263.47, which is an increase of £13.47, or a gain of 5.38%. So that's very good. I'm really pleased with that. However, it is not obviously as high as the increase that I have seen with the Invesco Markets ETF that I invested in, the NASDAQ one. And then the Vanguard Global Small Cap was the other investment that I made, again £250. The current value for that is £255.85, and that is at £5.85, which is a percentage gain of 2.34%. So that's great and has obviously beaten the returns of the Pacific Horizon Investment Trust. So I'm going to go into the overall investment returns now, and I will tell you a little bit about the other two Vanguard investments that I could have made that would potentially have been a closer comparison in terms of region and sector rather than risk level. So as I said, I invested £500 with Vanguard. That investment is now worth £519.32, which is an increase of £19.32, which overall is a percentage gain of 3.86%, which is great. However, the investments that I decided to make have currently gained much more than that, and that is obviously because of the massive returns that I've seen in that NASDAQ ETF. So I invested £4,876.59. The value is now at £5,299.58, which is an additional return of £422.99, which overall comes in at 8.67% return in 3 months, which I'm obviously really pleased with. I'm so pleased I've started doing this experiment and tracked these over the last 3 months just to see how they do. I find the psychology of why people make certain investments really interesting. So as I said before, I chose to make these investments based on risk level and their risk level profile, which runs all the way from 1 all the way up to 7 being the most risky. Now the investments that I have made are all at a risk level of 5 or 6, so on that higher level end of risk. So it'll be interesting to see how they do going forward. Just to add, as I said in the comments, a few people had said they'd like to see a comparison that was more based on region or sector. So if we're going to go into those figures, just so you can see how those would have done, as I said, there isn't a NASDAQ ETF available on Vanguard, so obviously I can't compare it, but potentially the closest kind of comparison that you might be looking at is the Vanguard S&P 500 VUSA, which is VUSA. It's difficult to find a perfect comparison, but if we were going to compare that, then that has gone up a percentage increase of 6.56% in the last 3 months since I would have invested on the 2nd of June. And then the investment that I made that I'd be most closely comparing that to has gone up 16%, which is the NASDAQ ETF that I purchased. Then looking at the Pacific Horizon Investment Trust next. So for the Pacific Horizon Investment Trust, there is a little bit more of a closer match in terms of geographical regions. So we could compare it to the Vanguard Pacific excluding Japan stock index, and if I'd invested in that, I would have made a percentage loss of 0.43% in the last 3 months since I started investing on the 2nd of June, and that does not include any fees because I've just taken that from the percentage returns that are reported on the Vanguard website. And the Pacific Horizon Investment Trust, which I chose to invest in, has gone up 1.76% in the last 3 months. So I have made a gain from investing in the Pacific Horizon Investment Trust, which I wouldn't have made if I'd invested in something a little bit closer in terms of geographical region. I really hope that you found this video interesting and that you've enjoyed seeing the comparisons of the different funds and ETFs and trusts that I have invested in here. I have lots more of this kind of in video where I show you everything that I'm invested in. To be honest, I'm a very open book and I'm happy to share everything apart from my account details. So thank you very much for watching. Any questions, please do pop them down below. I hope you like the addition of the geographical regions that were a bit closer to the investments. I hope that was helpful for some people. Let me know if you think I should include these figures in the next update. I will probably do another update at the 4-month mark, so please do subscribe if you fancy seeing how they're doing at 4 months. Perhaps they will all have crashed and burned. Who knows? Anyway, thank you very much for watching and have a lovely day. Bye bye.